Welcome to this week's Harness Racing Alumni Show. I'm Freddie Hudson, and I'm here as always with Trade Martin and Bob Marks. This week's Harness Racing Alumni Show is sponsored by Winbak Farm Canada's newest stallion, Captain's Quarters. The son of Captain Treacherous is standing his first season with a stud fee of $5,000 Canadian. For more information or to book a breeding, call 905-838-2145 or email stallions@winbakfarm.com. Captain's Quarters. Also, the Meadowlands Racetrack. Visit playthemeadowlands.com. And Hunterton Farm, breeding champions year after year. Visit huntertonfarm.com.
The Harness Racing Alumni Show with your hosts, Freddie Hudson and Trade Martin.
Joining us today, or I should say returning guests today, we have Gordon Banks and Michael Antoniades. Michael and Gordon, welcome back to the Harness Racing Alumni Show.
Thanks, Freddie. Good morning, and welcome to our audience as well.
So Michael, you're still at Oak Grove. I guess when is the last day? Is it today, or is there just one more day?
The last day is July 15th.
July 15th.
And they will start at the Red Mile next week, and Oak Grove will open next March.
Okay.
Today's closing day.
Yes, but
15th.
obviously this will air at a different day. So
correct.
That's true. That's true.
It will be history when we air it. But Gordon, you were talking a little bit about some of your ideas on Kentucky racing. Kentucky seems to be like the most successful right now, but you were talking about something about the Sire Stakes program.
Yeah, Kentucky definitely is the most successful, and the place that is most likely to succeed going forward. It'll probably be the mecca of harness racing as the East Coast tracks begin to diminish, I think. But I happen to have a 2-year-old filly that's in the Pacing Sire Stakes, and it's a Kentucky bred because it's a Pebble Beach, and so I'm more familiar with how they're handling the Kentucky sired, specifically Kentucky sired part of the program, and just a couple of things struck me as a little bit counterproductive. The first, that I'm presuming that the purpose of the actual Kentucky Stallion Sire Series is to try to promote people to breed and to own and to race locally, also helping the local trainers. And therefore you want to induce people in every way you can to buy those local products, which in most cases so far haven't been quite at the level of some of the best national product, because you had Chimpanzee, now you have Pebble Beach. You're going to have Always Be Mickey. But in the past, you've had very few mares and you've had very few quality sires in the state. So I understand it's an evolution. But what I'm seeing now is that the program needs to move to the next step to try to induce people to buy those specific types of products. And I think, number one, they have to make certain not to cap the amount of money that is available for those local sires at $2 million. Because if Chimpanzee and Pebble Beach or Always Be Mickey happen to have really top years, they're going to diminish the extra bonus for Kentucky, which is 50%, to make it pro rata based on the overage above the $2 million, which to me seems counterproductive in a situation where Kentucky has plenty of money. You want to really help that program to grow. And I just think that's very important. I think also they may want to consider something that they've been doing down under, which is to further benefit the local stallions. If they don't have enough product to create races only for Kentucky Stallion horses, which I think now they might actually have enough. In the beginning they didn't, but if they can't have enough, I think what they should do is take a perspective where if you're in with a Kentucky Stallion horse and you're racing against Captain Treacherouses and others that are dual state entries in those sire stakes, that whoever's the first horse that is a Kentucky Stallion horse to finish in that race gets a bonus. Because looking at it realistically, the Kentucky Stallion horses aren't generally, except for Chimpanzee and perhaps Pebble Beach this year, able to compete on an even basis with the best stallions. So why not help the local people and help build that industry by giving a bonus when you're racing against those big national types? If you finish fifth and you're the first Kentucky Stallion, why not give them something? I just think there's enough money there to handle it in a way that's going to provide momentum for the Kentucky program, and I just think it's a waste that they don't do that.
Michael?
Gordon, I think we need all the good ideas, and I'm glad Gordon's on the show because historically he has just a good look at things, and we need to consider everything. But let me throw the balance to that, specifically to Oak Grove. I go back to Sportsman's Park. At Sportsman's Park, the 2-year-old races were called baby races, and they went for $500, and they were non-betting. Monday during the day, they had 5 $30,000 now-winners of one for 2-year-olds at Oak Grove, which is landmark in the thoroughbred industry. Now, Gordon and I were talking about before that Kentucky and a lot of the thoroughbred tracks have maidens that were over 100,000, 120,000, and the apex, I believe, was Kentucky Downs. I think their maidens went for 177,000 last year. Through the course of this week, they distributed $2 million, and 2-year-olds have been competing for somewhere between $40,000 and $80,000 for the last 3 weeks. And some of those races, the opening week, went in 159. So you're able to race your 2-year-old for a lot of money, and as we know, money is the fuel for people that are in the yearling game. So to start these people off with 20, 50, 100,000 on their card already, it's a big, big thing. But, of course, Kentucky's on an enormous roll, the whole state. It's different because, again, Gordon and I were talking about this. I can clearly recall in Canada and New York when they would come on and the track for a claiming race, and they would say there's 8 claims on the 1, there's 17 claims on the 2, there's 6 claims on the 2, and eventually all those people stopped. Some of those people got forced out of the business. The bigger outfits became bigger and bigger and bigger. And, at least for Kentucky, they've got the hard part figured out, the revenue part. They've got the money to do this. So, yes, our maidens don't go for $175,000, but to put all this money in different hands on the people that went to your yearling sales and supported you, that's a positive thing.
Yeah, those $30,000 races, if I remember correctly, were for Kentucky sired. The non-Kentucky sired maidens were like $16,000, which is still fantastic. But I'm really happy to see that they have the maiden for the Kentucky Stallion horses for the $30,000. I don't know if they did it for the whole meet, but I just think that they should step back and look at what it is they're doing and why they want to do it. If they're doing it to induce investment in the Kentucky Stallion end of the business, then I think they should be doing something aimed at that, which they aren't really doing now. They certainly had enough horses going this week, Kentucky sired, that they could have had Kentucky Stallion sired divisions. And they could have actually implemented the system just specifically for those Kentucky Stallion horses, and they could have gone for a lot more money. I don't know. I think Kentucky's a great program. I'm not trying to be critical. I just think that there are things they could do to make it better.
Well, like you said, it's an evolving program, and we need to listen to everybody's ideas.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Now, hey, Gordon, explain how the bonus structure works for our audience.
Well, I'm not sure that I'm the best to explain that, but from what I understand, for example, a horse races, a Kentucky Stallion sired horse goes in an open sire stake race, because at this point they haven't had Stallion Series legs just for the Kentucky Stallion horses. They go in that race, and then they get a 50% bonus in terms of whatever they earn in those Stallion races, first through fifth. So if a horse wins, as Mike said, most of the divisions, they started at 40, then they were 50 and 60, and the final was 80 for the A division. If a horse wins the A and wins $40,000, it wins an extra 20. If it's a Kentucky Stallion horse, it gets that bonus. It gets that bonus at the end of the year. And what I was referring to is the fact that it's marketed as a 50% bonus, with a sort of small print caveat that if more than $2 million is earned by these Kentucky Stallion bred babies, that there'll be a pro rata decrease in the extent of the bonus to the extent necessary. And I just think that's petty. I don't think that there's any benefit served by trying to curtail what they're marketing in that manner. But that's how the program works, and it's a great program. I mean, if you have a sire and stallion horse, you don't have to go out of your state. You just race as a 2-year-old in Kentucky. There's no real need to go anywhere else.
To balance that again, let me just say that it's grown so exponentially. And let me give you some figures. Like in 2014, purses in Kentucky were $1.6 million. This year, if you count all the peripheral stuff and everything, it's up to $25 million. So they've gone from less than 2 to about $25 million. 2014, 43 2-year-olds, 1,000 2-year-olds this year. And mares nominated from 500 to over 2,000. So it's, however we think the business is, in 2 years it's going to be probably different. And trying to adapt to all these things isn't the easiest thing to do, but again, we need to listen to everybody.
Well, I think they've been doing a good job in general. I mean, I know they've been reaching out to a lot of people to try to figure out how to restructure the sire stake program to make it more competitive and to get bigger fields in some of the tougher divisions. They've been having problems with sort of A horses racing in the B and C divisions and then moving up and down or whatever. They've been trying to regulate that and come up with a method that works the best that one can envisage. And I think they're making a lot of progress with it. And I take your point, but I still get the feeling that there's plenty of money in Kentucky I mean, if you're looking, why cap something at $2 million if it's going to go to $2.5 million, for example? The $500,000 isn't going to hurt, from my understanding, knowing nothing about the specific figures. It isn't going to hurt the state. Why get petty over a small amount of money like that when the overall scheme of things is so much bigger?
I know that when Steve Stewart was on our show last week, Steve had basically brought up the horsemen were looking for the finals to be like, I think it was one of the series over there, to be $25,000 purse. And Steve basically said, well, let's just ask for $50,000. So they asked for $50,000, and they got the $50,000 for the final. I think that's for the Proud Series.
Yeah. Mike probably does know the financial situation over there. I don't really. I just think, look, it's the best. Kentucky is without a doubt the current center and future of harness racing in the States. Second probably is Ohio. When you get behind that, everything is suspect. I mean, Indiana looks good, but there are storm clouds on the horizon. New Jersey is in serious trouble. Pennsylvania has to be in serious trouble, because how long can states continue to pay out huge bonuses when nobody's at the tracks, nobody's betting, the money goes out of state? You have so many needs for police and fire and social causes and medical. Just common sense sort of indicates that over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to have a significant drop down in the Northeast. So Kentucky really is the mecca.
Hey, Michael. Now you were talking about the claiming races versus the 2-year-old races. Does Kentucky still have claiming races?
Almost none. And if you'll notice, I think we have evolved around that. If you go to the two biggest tracks, which is the Meadowlands and Woodbine, where they bet the most money, there's not a lot of claiming races at those tracks either. A typical claiming card 20 years ago at Woodbine, I don't know if you saw the other day, but I think they had 10 2-year-old races on a Friday. I know.
Right.
That brings back days of Joe DeFrank, but and the Meadowlands also had a plethora of 2-year-old races on Friday. Now this is your future. I'm not going to tell you that looking at 9 babies that show a qualifier or two isn't the greatest situation for a bettor as far as information, but this is how you drive your future, and it's encouraging to see our sport, at least some tracks, they have gone to the model of the yearling that babies provide a lot of excitement, and this is the time of hope for everyone.
Yeah, Mike brings up, I think, a really interesting point, and he's probably more politic than I am, and he's using code more than than I do. But I think the implication is that the claiming races have generally been the domain of the more drug-related trainers, and that there's an element that comes in the aged racing and the claiming racing that is different from the baby racing, and that it's detrimental to the sport. I think there aren't many people that would argue with that. On the other side of the coin, from an owner's perspective, I know that I liked having the availability of high-end claimers. And back in the old days at Meadowlands, my cousin and I had quite a lot of horses that were in the 100 claimers, 150 claimers, and it gave an outlet for those kind of horses. And another thing it did was make it much easier to import horses, especially the down under horses. If you had 100 claimers now at the Meadowlands or available somewhere, you'd see a tremendous number of horses coming from down under that aren't coming. Because if you have to spend $100,000 to get a horse over here and then earn it out in condition races over a pretty fair amount of time, there's a lot of risk. If you can bring a horse in for $100,000 and the next day put it in a 100 claimer, it's going to induce a lot of people to buy those kind of horses and perhaps raise the horse population. So I think there's a plus and there's a minus, there's a pro and a con. But I think in general, Mike's point, I hadn't really thought about it before. I think it's a very good point, and we have to be pushing more for the young horses. And just an adjunct to that is down under and in Europe. I don't know if it's true in Europe today, but I know 10 years ago it was. You didn't have many claiming races. And I haven't seen a claiming race down under for more than $10,000. And in Europe, I don't remember seeing any that were material. So his notion of being much more top-heavy with young horses and non-claiming horses is certainly proven out on an international model so far, and it creates more excitement, I think, in the fan base. So I don't really argue, but it's nice to have.
It is, but all the things you said were true. But let me give you a horrible example. In Illinois, I remember when they went to non-winners to be claimed. I think Phil Langley was the first person to write a non-winners to be claimed. And we had a discussion, and even though you got an allowance, because usually it was a young horse, now there's a 3 to be claimed for, $9,000. You're putting a price on this horse now that somebody spent $20,000 as a yearling, spent another $30,000 to get to the races, and you're pricing them at like $15,000 now?
Yeah, but Mike, it was different then. We were chatting about it before. Then you didn't have any monetization of horses online. It's like Ongait now has changed everything. If I have a horse, correct, I can sell it for what the market is at any point in time with Ongait. And that didn't exist before. Before, if I had a horse that I paid $75,000 for, and it was a really poor horse, and it was only worth $15,000, He didn't have any way to sell it easily. So the claiming, even though what you say is true, that claiming outlet made sense for some people because they wanted to, make some money or get rid of the horse. But in general, I agree with you. But now with Ongait, I just don't think there's any need for claimers as much as there was. But I still say the high-end claimers, the 100, 150 claimers, personally, I'd like to see those.
Well, maybe if we get our horse population to where it should be, we can have those again. But I certainly think right now is the right time.
That's true. But I would say that again, I can only assume others might do what I would do. There are a lot of horses that I see from down under that I could buy for $100,000. And if I had the money to do that, I would do that, but only when I thought there was an outlet. A lot of the horses, I turned down a lot of horses because I don't want to have a 9-month payback period. But if there were 100, 150 claimers, I think you'd see the market for top horses from down under jump. Because that's a lot of money for people down under.
Well, I think also you could see the same thing if you had Fantasy Downs somewhere down the road with a $50,000 open and a $40,000 preferred and a $35,000 winners over. That would create the market for overseas horses.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. There's some truth to that. Ohio does that. Ohio, not at Scioto, but when you're at the other tracks, the opens are in the mid-high 30s, and the purses are great, like Yonkers. Basically, Yonkers and Ohio do that, and all the foreign horses come in, go to those tracks pretty much. Because if you're racing at Pocono, Chester, Meadowlands, other tracks, you can't basically make the money to support that situation. It's only those tracks you can go to.
I want to cover a major topic here. I want you both to respond. Now, Kenny Jackson had the dream. The dream was to always have a signature race at Oak Grove, and the race he came up with was a pretty good race. It was a $500,000 race for 3-year-old colts and a $300,000 companion stake for fillies to be raced early in May. And the concept there was the interest in racing is at a fever pitch. As soon as the Derby prep races start through the Belmont. Now, obviously, there's continued support through Saratoga and the Travers and the Pacific Classic and all that up to the Breeders' Cup. But it's at an enormous amount of interest for people that have nothing to do with racing. They pick up racing during that period. For us not to have signature races during that period, I think we would be better served by having more races. And if we did have people move some of their stakes into the earlier part of the year, I think all these races, the stakes schedule would fit much better, and we wouldn't have the plethora of short fields that sometimes we seem to have, just like the thoroughbreds do.
You're talking about 3-year-old races in particular.
Well, specifically, but I think generally speaking, we need to understand that the sire stakes, all of a sudden, we didn't have sire stakes that went for the money we go for now 20 years ago. So now we've added lucrative programs in Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania. I could go on, right? And all these finals have 3 or 4 legs. You have to extend the season to make all this stuff fit. To think that you could just look at the same season, make all this fit, try and pound the round peg into a square hole, it doesn't fit. So if we could just somehow figure out to do a better job with our stake season, I think we'd have much better subscribed stakes also, because you wouldn't be putting such pressure on these owners to make these decisions where to go.
Michael, I'm going to jump in here. I think that's a pretty good idea, but I think like with Kentucky has the 4-year-old sire stakes, and I think that would be a perfect fit for 4-year-old sire stake races.
Well, I think that the difficulty you have. Well, first of all, the 2-year-old is irrelevant really, because the season is it is what it is. So you're talking 3-year-old and older. I think on the older, the problem we have, including 4-year-olds, is that you got the Borgata Series at Yonkers in late March, April, May, which basically takes almost all the top horses that would be racing at that time. Now, you have an opening because a lot of horses don't like the half-mile track, so a lot of the top horses don't get ready for it. If there were a race at Oak Grove or in the Red Mile or something, it would probably attract better horses. But it is a problem, and I have a lot of babies, and from my perspective, I always seem to think that what racing wants to do is protect the market for the mediocre horses, because you can't race in by having so many races at the same time, you're limiting the ability of the really top horses to maximize, and you're protecting the interests of the somewhat second tier to be able to win big races, because everybody can't be everywhere. But I think it makes it very tough. If you could come up with a way to stagger racing, to maximize it in the period that would be best, like you're saying, Mike, but also to stagger it so people could intelligently cover more of the races, I think it'd be great. But there's so many of them. It's hard to do.
We're going to have some good races, by the way. So, I mean, you're developing a lot of good rivalries within the sport at the 3-year-old level and the age level, and I think you're going to see some fabulous racing. Adios next couple of weeks, the Meadowlands on Hamiltonian Day. I think you saw that the filly's going to try the Adios, and that
I didn't read that.
interest.
Yeah, I didn't read that yet. No.
We got a lot of big stars, and I think these next weeks here, hopefully a lot of people that don't follow racing will be drawn to the sport by some of the racing that we're going to have.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's true. What worries me is that the way you just mentioned, I've been busy. I haven't been able to follow things as closely as usual, but I wasn't even aware that the filly was going in the race, and it leads to the point of how much the industry needs to focus on getting word out and creating excitement and bringing it in. Otherwise, all the benefits that you want to see get lost.
Well, I thought the Meadows did a good job. It was announced yesterday. The elims are this weekend, and the finals are the following weekend. So it's a big story. I mean, obviously, it's a very big story for the people in the industry, but I think these are the type of things that can draw interest from outside the sport.
I hope so. That'd be great.
Okay, hey guys, with that, I'm going to close the show out. We're a little over half an hour right now, but I do have one quick question for you, Gordon. You had that filly for sale from Australia. Were you able to sell her, or do you still own her?
Yeah, no, I still own her. The market has gotten very difficult, and it's always tough for me to sell a horse that I own, because people always think if I'm selling it, there must be a reason. And really, it's just usually that I like bringing horses over that I've raced down under. I know what they are, and I can stand behind them, and I'm always willing to keep a part of the horse. But I don't like to take profit and turn it into loss by completely speculating on bringing a horse over here that I've made money with down under. I like to cash out, keep some of it to sell here. And this one, for some reason, she's a really good mare. I just haven't been able to sell her for a reasonable price. And so, I'm keeping her down there, and at some point in time, maybe I'll bring her over or something will happen. But no, amazingly enough, that mare did not sell.
And I know you were including the shipping costs over in the price for her, which is about $20,000 now?
No, the shipping. You wish it was $20,000. The shipping now is really close to $30,000 because you have a 10% tariff. So best case, it's $27,000, $28,000. But for a fair guesstimate, I'd say $30,000. And the horse's name is Namaka. She's really a nice mare. She was timed in 49 and change at Menangle down under. She won in 150 and change. And she's just a nice mare. Takes every size track. And I was asking for 100 landed U.S. And for whatever reason, couldn't get it. And I thought it was reasonable, and I wasn't going to, modify my position, and I won't. But, the horses down under, if they make $30,000 a year, down under in their money. They actually turn profitable. The cost structure is completely different. And so she's quite profitable down there. You know, she's made over $150,000. She's early in a 4-year-old year. So I have no need to move her. I just thought it's the right time. But no, the market is difficult for horses. Everybody wants to buy horses at $50,000, $75,000 landed, and they're taking a pot shot because, you know, some of them really turn out well, but probably 1 or 2 out of 5 turn out well. You just don't hear about the other 3 that were cheap horses and are cheap horses when they get here. You know, quality is you know, the best thing to look at, I think, in any business to the point that you can afford it.
All right, Gordon, thank you for joining us. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Well, pleasure, and always nice to chat with you, Mike.
Yes, same with you, Gordon, and for those of you out there, take a friend to the racetrack.
Okay, guys. This week's Harness Racing Alumni Show is sponsored by Winbak Farm Canada's newest staffing, Captain's Quarters. The son of Captain Treacherous is standing his first season with a stud fee of $5,000 Canadian. For more information or to book a breeding, call 905-838-2145 or email stallions@winbakfarm.com. Captain's Quarters. Also, the Meadowlands Racetrack. Visit playthemeadowlands.com. And Hunterton Farm, breeding champions year after year. Visit huntertonfarm.com. That's a wrap for this week's show. Thanks for listening, and please join us again next week.
The Harness Racing Alumni Show